Hey, thank you so much for watching or listening today. Totally stoked that you're here. And we're continuing a series called Kids and Parents. Seems like a good series, thinking about Father's Day, and that's kind of right. We're in the thick of that. And Mother's Day, we just finished last month. We're transitioning into summertime, out of school. And some of us don't have kids, and you're like, yeah, the kids are everywhere now. What's going on? Oh, they're out of school. That's right. And some of you are like, ooh, my kids are home. Now what am I going to do with them? For me, my kids are doing this really interesting hopscotch work thing because they're all in their late teens, just around 20. And so they're working. Compared to last year, it's fantastic. They've got a couple of jobs each. And I'm all, woohoo, bring it on. The more work, the better for them. They earn money. They learn how to navigate that. And that's a good thing. Totally good. So it's a season kind of when kids and parents, it's a little bit in our thinking in this because of all the transition stuff going on. But I've been also thinking, and I've been talking about this, I've been reading 1 Samuel the last week or so, and I'm interested to watch the kids and the parents in these first chapters of this book, 1 Samuel. And today I want to talk about parents who have kids who don't follow in their ways. And I think when you look in these first chapters, and we're going to hit 1 Samuel a little bit as well as a couple other people, but we all think about our kids, or maybe yourself as well. And maybe, you've trained your kids. I had this happen with one of my kids recently. I've trained my kids to be thankful, to say thank you, like fundamental polite. And we had a few little mishaps in the last week or two where there's not a lot of gratitude. It's just kind of expected that I will do. And I'm like, and so I confronted one of my kids and I was like, hey, the cost of this item is $10, or you can say thank you. Pick which one you want. I was cranky. I didn't raise you to be ungrateful, so. And I'm sure they'll grow and mature and get better, whatever. And if they don't, you know what? They're becoming independent humans. And I can't make them do that. I can encourage them, lead them to water, but you can't make a horse drink. And the same way with some of these kids in 1 Samuel, because I want to just point out to you, Eli, who is the high priest, and he's over the tabernacle. He lives in this city in Israel called Shiloh. And it's interesting. I like 1 Samuel because it's right after Judges. And Judges is this book of it's a cycle, and it seems like a swirling downward trajectory. The Israelites, they start to worship the idols around them, and they start to go down the toilet, and then God brings in a judge who gets them back on the right track, and then they start doing it again. And so it's like this 20, 40-year cycle of decline, judge, right on the right, and it repeats, but it gets worse every single time. So by the time we get to 1 Samuel, I'm thrilled because when you read the end of Judges, it's just brutal. But 1 Samuel, we get Hannah praying for a supernatural baby. But at the same time, we have Eli, who is the chief priest. He's the one that's responsible to make sure the tabernacle flows and functions smoothly, that sacrifices happen right. There's order and structure, and people who come to worship and offer sacrifices, that they are served and their sacrifices are appropriately executed and demonstrated, and he's responsible. This is the hub. The tabernacle is the hub of worship, of honoring God, the God who brought them out of Egypt, across the Red Sea, all that stuff. So this is a really important position, and the tabernacle is an important place. And so Eli, who is the high priest, he has two boys, and their names are Hophni and Phinehas. Now I know some of you think Phineas and Ferb, but the original Phinehas was Eli's son. And here's the deal. These boys did not walk in the ways of God, and they grew up as the chief priest's sons. And I think this is interesting because in some ways I can kind of relate to that. I am so to speak, a pastor's kid. So I grew up in church. These boys grew up in the tabernacle. They grew up around sacrifices and offerings. They grew up around worship expressions. Their dad likely taught them the Torah, taught them the Ten Commandments, taught them, proper righteous behavior. They grew up in all this stuff, and yet they lost the plot. And I've had people say to me, and they talk about pastors' kids. Ooh, they're the worst. And I always wince when I hear that, because I think, there's this expectation, well, you guys grow up in this. And it's true. I slept under pews. In fact, I took a friend yesterday to the old church building where I lived the first 6 months of my life. I'm like in the basement. I ate, breathed, slept. This was my second home, was church. So I've been around it, and I can appreciate the pressures and the demands and the struggles and the pushes. And sometimes people come into church, and you know what? They're weird. I don't know how to say it any other way. There's just, and you're like, well, you could say that with more diplomacy. Okay, they're unique, whatever you want to say. But the thing is, as offspring, when our kids don't follow in the ways of God, what do we do with that? And when they have seasons, maybe they have a season where they're not following God, and you're like, that's not a season. We call that a decade, And that can be a struggle for us as parents. And I appreciate that Eli confronted his sons. At one point, as they're adults, he says to them, you guys are dishonoring the sacrifices of God by taking out the best meat. And then later on, a prophet confronts Eli and says, your sons, they're bad news. They're sleeping with the women who take care of the tabernacle door. And it's awful. And sometimes when we have kids who don't walk in the ways of God, we want to get cranky and confront them and change them. And I think we have to ask in ourselves, what's in me? Am I wanting them do I want to control them? Or do I really sincerely want them to know God and to have that peace and fulfillment of walking with God in their lives? And when we have kids that don't follow the plot, maybe they're Hophni and Phinehas, they've walked away. Maybe they knew God at one point, but they turned their back on God and have gone a different direction. Then family, let's be conscientious to pray for our kids, to remain steady, to be loving and kind. And if they're hostile with us and combative and they challenge us and they criticize, our faith in Jesus, I was just reading just today, when somebody says something evil to you on behalf of Jesus, then turn the other cheek. You're like, ooh, that's hard. It is, and particularly I think with our kids. But I think as we keep faithful with God and we entrust our children to the hands of God, who is their ultimate father, parent, then I think God is the one, and they have to work out their own path and response and dialogue with God. Eli confronted his sons. His sons did not respond. And I think God gave him more than one chance to change, and they didn't. And so God said, okay, enough. And that was a tragic conclusion, because Hophni and Phinehas died in a battle. The Ark of the Covenant was captured in a battle. It says when Eli heard the news of the Ark of the Covenant getting captured, he fell over backwards. I guess he was heavy. That's a polite way to say overweight. And he broke his neck and he died. You talk about tragic. It's tragic. But that's sometimes we want our kids to follow, but they don't always, because they have a free will. And I think that's an important expression, participant with genuine love. Because genuine love doesn't create paper dolls and cookie cutters. Genuine love says, okay, you have a free will, and I respect your freedom to choose whatever, and I will continue to love you despite the choices that you make. I may not like your decisions, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. And I think as parents, when we have kids who lose the plot, who go whatever, kind of go way off grid, let's be careful. Be careful about continuing to love our kids, to walk with them. And you can disagree and not be disagreeable. If your kids are disagreeable with you, Well, it doesn't mean you get cranky and prickly back, because we let love compels us, genuine love. And I think that's the ultimate expression of our Heavenly Father, is that our Heavenly Father, when you look at the prodigal son parable, the Heavenly Father goes out to both boys, the reprobate as well as the one that was totally upstanding and righteous. That is our Father's love to us. And so when our kids fall away, or if they walk away, we continue to pray for them, we continue to love them, we continue to walk with them, to continue to have some conversations and be respectful and kind and gentle, but continuing to walk with them. And maybe you've confronted them and they don't respond well, but then we just hand them into God's hands. I say this because Samuel also had kids who didn't walk in his ways. And then I also looked at David. David had 19 kids, 19. And when you look at how they behaved, those first 3 to 5 of them were complete train wrecks. Down the road, we got Solomon, and God picked Solomon to be the next leader. But I'm just telling you that we need to trust God with our kids. And ultimately, that's the end game I would encourage you with today, is that you trust God with your kids. So finally, I say this. Here's a question for you to think about. What are some contrasts? This is a really good one. What are some contrasts between your earthly parents and your Heavenly Father? Right? Well, my earthly parents are my Heavenly Father is And I think that's really important to think about some of that, because when we explore those contrasts, then it helps us align better in terms of being God's son or God's daughter, and recognizing and respecting that our parents, earthly parents, are flawed and human, and that's okay too, because we are equally flawed and human. So thank you so much for subscribing. Of course, you want to hit the notification bell right there. Thanks for answering that question. And of course, we have this fantastic joke, and here it is. Brace yourself. I'm making a new documentary series on how to fly an airplane. We are currently filming the pilot. You're like, what's a pilot? A pilot is a test program, also a person who flies an airplane. Okay, next week will be lots better. Thanks so much.